مساء الخير وأهلا وسهلا بكم في حوار جديد مع المنصة. في مطلع التسعينات دخلت مدرسة حكومية مصرية للمرة الأولى، ولم أدرك حينها أن البحث في التعليم سيقودني إلى ميادين السياسة. المقطع ده من كتاب لدكتورة بتدرس في قسم الدراسات العالمية في جامعة إلينوي في أوربانا شامبين بالولايات المتحدة، واللي صدر له ترجمة عربية لأول مرة في مصر هذا العام تحت عنوان تعليم المصريين. ليندا هيرايرا اللي بتشرفنا النهاردة عندها تجربة طويلة في التجول في المدارس المصرية وإجراء العشرات وربما المئات من المقابلات مع كافة أطراف العملية التعليمية في مصر من الطلبة إلى الأساتذة. وعلى مدار التجربة الطويلة دي شافت تحولات مهمة في نظام التعليم المصري من سيطرة الدولة القومية إلى الخصخصة. دكتورة ليندا بتشوف إن التحولات دي ما هياش أكتر من انعكاس للواقع السياسي المصري. بتعبير آخر، عشان نصلح التعليم لازم نبدأ من السياسة. حوالين الموضوع ده هتكون معانا الدكتورة ليندا النهاردة ونتناقش معاها. أهلا دكتور.
أهلا بيك.
وفرصة عظيمة جدا إن احنا نلتقي بحضرتك.
أنا أسعد بجد.
يعني أنا عايز أبدأ من الإطار النظري للكتاب بتاع حضرتك والشغل حضرتك بشكل عام، واللي لاحظت إن الكتاب إن حضرتك بتتكلمي على فكرة المعرفة والسلطة. ودي يمكن فكرة ما هياش يعني هي شائعة في الأدبات العربية، لكن يمكن مش معروفة بشكل كبير للجمهور العام، لأنه الناس دايما بتبص يعني ما بتبص على هيمنة الدولة، بتبص على الأدوات المادية للهيمنة، لكن ما حدش بيبص على الهيمنة الإيديولوجية، على إن المدرسة ممكن تبقى مجال من مجالات اللي الدولة بتسيطر فيها على الناس وبتخطط طريقة تفكيرهم وحياتهم بشكل عام. أعتقد حضرتك متبنية الإطار ده ومحتاجين نفهمه أكتر من واقع مشاهداتك في التعليم المصري.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me here. I'm very honored to be here on the show. I want to start with the subtitle of the book, because I think the subtitle really explains what is my orientation, and then I'll tell you how I got there. So it's تعليم المصريين القيم المدنية والنضالات الإيديولوجية. So I'm very interested in the school as a site of citizenship or civic participation, and also a competing space of different ideologies. I know in the book it was translated as knowledge and power, but it's really more I'm interested in the different forces that interact in a school, which makes it very complicated on the idea of what it means to be a citizen, in this case an Egyptian, but we can ask that question in any place. And what are the different ideological forces that are at play inside of this unit of a school and then a bigger system of education?
Mm-hmm. The everyday politics, I think this some's related to this field.
That's a piece of it. That's a piece of it. But I'm really looking, at that kind of competition between different forces and influences.
So we can understand from watching the everyday interaction inside the school what's happening in politics.
The reason I like schools is because they're very complicated spaces. So we can say that the power or the competition happens at so many different levels. If you're just looking at student culture, and that's one thing I'm very interested in, you see so many dynamics. You see hierarchies within the student culture, according to issues like who's the smartest one or getting the best grades, who has the nicer clothes, social class, looks, fashion, maybe in some places their ability to say the Quran the best. So there's all this stratification happening in student culture. Then you have in teachers a lot of stratification happening. Maybe certain teachers have more prestige, the ones who are teaching subjects that have more daraja fil majmua, like the math teachers or the Arabic teachers. You have teachers like the art teachers or others who are in lower status inside the school. You have the first teacher, you have the senior teachers. You have all of this hierarchy and power relations happening among teachers. Same thing in the adara. You have the nazra, na'ib al-nazra, and you have all, different people. So you have at every layer power relations and hierarchy, and you have in between the relationship between the teachers and إدارة, the administration with the students, the administration with the governorate with the state with the international organizations and funding. So all of these things somehow can come together in a school. And that's why it's so interesting.
So you analyze the school unit as if you are analyzing politics. You are looking at the power relation inside a small school unit.
Yeah, so I started in studies in the school just to understand Egyptian society. I was new in Egypt, I was an anthropologist, and I thought the best way to understand a society, go to their school. See how children are socialized. But little by little, I realized there's much more happening than just cultural things in a school. There's all these power relations. So it is also a way to understand struggles within society, politics, ideology.
But where is the footprint of the state inside these dynamics? Yani, how the state uses school?
So different ways. So most people start studying education with like the Constitution. What does it say about education? Or state policies or textbooks. So the first, a very easy place to start is textbooks. What are the messages in the textbooks? But for me, as an anthropologist, I also want to see what are the regulations in the school that are coming from the state. For me, the first very interesting thing was the Tabor, because it was new for me. And
you didn't see this in the state?
It looks very different. It looks very different. So when I first saw the Tabor from outside a school, I thought the school was a military academy for girls. Really, I did. And I was asking my Egyptian friend, like, what are they doing? The drum and the marching and the Tahiyat Jumhuriyat Masr. So I didn't understand, what is this? And then my friend told me, it's a school, of course, that's a Tabor, you know. And then when I went into the school, I studied what is the relationship between the Tabor and becoming a citizen of a place. What is the relationship between, you know, the uniform and lining up and the rules and the ideas about what it means to be an Egyptian and to be socialized into the society. And then I also saw all of these things outside of those norms. People breaking the rules all the time, doing alternative things. And then I started thinking, what are the struggles happening in the school?
So Tabor may give you or make you think that you are studying a kind of a failure state, that putting a very restricted rules, but people always
I wouldn't
moving
say,
around it.
No, I wouldn't say a failed state. I would say there's an idealized notion. When a state, any country in the world, comes in and organizes a school system, they have objectives. We want someone to come out of this thing to be a leader, to be a citizen, to be a, you know, someone who supports the government, whatever it is. And there are ways and activities to do that. But in any school system, there's things happening around the sides. I wouldn't say it's a failed state. It's part of human relations and human culture, you know.
But you also try to study the history of this system, from the Nasser system to the current system.
Yeah.
How did you see the evolving or the changing in this system during the last decades?
So I initially went in to do an ethnography of a school to understand Egypt, but I understood after like several months there that Egypt for me is a window into understanding history. The history of politics and education, and it's a fascinating case study. So I think if you go deep into what was happening in Egypt, you can understand many shifts and changes in the world, in the political economy, in big political struggles and revolution and economic shifts. So I started to go deeper into the big questions, but staying grounded in Egypt, because I was living in Egypt at the time. So when you say, I was interested in the movements for nationalism. So the post-colonial, what happened to education and institutions for learning in the post-colonial period. And Egypt is a very brilliant example of that, how it became nationalized. There became more of an emphasis on Arabic. It became more standardized. But this happened in every new nation state in the world. So I was here looking at Egypt, but then could understand what was happening in other places too.
Sure, but you witnessed also the following decades, and how far the system was shifting dramatically from national state to the privatized schooling.
So now this is just chance that I happened to arrive in Egypt in 1986. This was still very much the later stage of nationalism. We know in 1989 there was a break with the fall of the
structural
Berlin
adjustment
Wall.
policies.
Exactly. So I came here when it was still like the old system. So the first ethnography, which is in the book, is still the old system. Kind of the school is a site of national cohesion or citizenship building, and nationalism is not questioned. A little bit it was being questioned by the Islamic trend, a little bit at that time, but that happened much more in the 90s. So I was looking at the school as a microcosm of the nation, but I stayed with education, and for my doctorate I was looking, because I was living in Egypt in the 90s. So I went from the 80s to the 90s, and I saw with my eyes this change happening with more influence from international organizations, getting their hands in the curriculum, in pushing in computers and bringing technology in. And I understood also by reading the literature that education was shifting. The world was trying to prepare students not only to be good citizens, but to be good workers in a global economy. And that was a big shift.
To integrate students, like integrating the whole economy in the global
Exactly.
economy.
And education through big institutions like UN organizations, World Bank, USAID, all of these different, were supporting or bringing loans and bringing grants and bringing experts to help to shift the orientation of schools.
So do you think that the experts of international institutions really reform the educational system, or just left us with a huge inequality inside the system?
So another reason I'm very fascinated by Egyptian education, you have everything existing at the same time. You have the old traditions of memorization and hierarchies existing, with the new layer of nationalism existing, with the neoliberal, like more privatized, they're all there. And that's what I mean by competing ideologies. So in Egypt, you have about 90% of schools are government schools. So it's not privatized in the sense of you're going to a private school and paying, but it did inject certain elements into education. More individualism, I would say less communalism, through the curriculum. For some time it was trying, and this was especially USAID, it incorporated a curriculum center and was trying to replace religion classes, Christianity and Islam, with values, a class on values for everybody. But there was like fierce opposition to that. And I was here at that time, and I was also looking, what is this curriculum center doing? And it was actually playing with issues around Palestine, trying to take out solidarity with Palestine. I mean, there are a lot of things. So this is also ideology. So politics and ideology are coming in. But in that case, the people, like journalists, found out about it, and teachers found out about it, and there was a big resistance. And so the curriculum center had to keep the religion and
solidarity with Palestine.
To some of that was changed, but it couldn't be changed to the extent that the experts wanted it to be changed. So there's always this give and take, this push and pull.
I mean by question that their efforts to make students more integrated to the global system. Did they really succeed in this?
Not really, because who gets integrated into the global system? That's based on class and wasta and opportunity. So it's not as if people from a modest government school are going to be, they will have their place in the system. It's not going to be the best place. Still, that's based on class and who has access and the hierarchies in society. But someone from a simple government school might have a place in a low rank, but that doesn't mean they're going to be making
So the whole 90% of the governmental schools is still so far from the global economy until now.
That's a complicated question. No, I think the training has shifted a little bit, but the people who are really benefiting from the global economy are probably the people still in the private schools from big families. We can ask the question of what kind of employment can students have graduating from the system, and why has there been a shift to entrepreneurship rather than state employment? That's been a huge shift, as we know. And I think there's some confusion because when these schools were built and the system was built, the assumption was that the graduates would find a safe spot in the government, civil service. That's not the case anymore. So it's much more precarious or uncertain now. Where is this education leading people? To what kind of livelihood?
You have met, I think, with different kind of teachers from different grades. Did this system serve them or help them to do their job in a way that enables them to really help students to be more advanced and more integrated to the market system even?
So let me first say that I'm a big advocate of teachers. Teachers are often scapegoated as the problem with the system, but they're under so many pressures and so many competing ideas about what does it mean to be educated. So let's start with that. So one ideology is you're educated to go out to the job market. That's just one. But many people really believe you're educated to be a good person, to have values, to understand what religion expects of you, to be kind. I mean, there are different reasons for being educated. To be mu'addab, to be a person with knowledge and culture. So these are reasons that are not related to the job market. And then there are skills which are connected to, we think, are connected to getting jobs. This is all theoretical, by the way. So skills with computers, with English, with some mathematical skills or whatever it is. So what are teachers doing? So teachers have different ideas of what they're doing as teachers. What is their role as an educator? Is it to create a decent, moral person? Is it to create a person who can survive in a competitive, very cutthroat environment outside of school? Is it a person and some people, there are still religion teachers to make sure the person understands their religion and the values. So it's not one answer. So I think there's competing ideas of what education is.
This is about their perspective, but I'm asking about the work environment, because there always a criticism to the current wages of teachers, and they have to give some special courses to خصوصية, to as a complementary income, to just live on the minimum wage. So what did you see about the work environment of the teachers in Egypt?
Well, this is part of the competition. When we talk about, how did neoliberalism come into education, it made it a place of competition. And it also connected with things like rankings. So rankings are just not happening internationally. They're happening within schools. What schools are having top students? Which schools have more students, passing than others? So I think it has been a very corrupting feature for teachers not to have a livable wage, and they haven't had a livable wage for a very long time, and to try to find ways to supplement their income through durus khususiyan. We know this story very well, and that's, we see, it used to be when I started here, there was a little bit of private lessons in the adedi, in the prep stage, because third year prep exam is really important for if you get into a high school. But most of the lessons were for high school, for the ثانوية عامة. But now we have, starting from kindergarten, teachers doing lessons. And as you know, and the Egyptian audience knows very well, there's very big range of what happens in that space of private lessons, range from teachers harassing their students in the classroom unless they take private lessons, to really excellent teachers will give you a discount if you can't afford it to helping you, to big stars who have like, I don't know, thousands of students and have spillover rooms and screens to give lessons, and they drive the most expensive car. So you have that whole range. And that's part of, I think, how this new economic mentality and model has come into schools. So teachers are under a lot of pressure, always adding to their responsibilities and always getting new trainings to do new things. So they don't just wipe out what they did before and take something new. And often those new reforms are temporary. And teachers who are especially more senior, they get tired. They're like, we've seen this before. So no, and often reforms are not coming from within the school environments. Like teachers, you ask them, they know exactly what they need, exactly. But someone comes and tells them, I don't care what you think. I'm going to tell you what the reform is so that we can be a school of the future or whatever.
Something like the rule of experts, the term of Timothy Mitchell.
Exactly. And I think, and teachers have been really treated unfairly in a lot of this paradigm of this rule of experts when it comes to changes in education.
So how did it affect the students themselves and their perspective about their school? I think it was changed during the recent decade, as you mentioned in your book.
Yeah. Students are in a different, they want to move through the system and get some success through the school. I think they're less thinking critically about reforms. They just have to work with them. So students are very clever of trying to calculate what is it that I need to do to succeed. And they have to always make new calculations for that. And they're pretty smart about that. I think it's much harder at the level of the teacher and the administrators.
Do you think that they are feeling loyal to the system and they are dealing with it as a serious thing, or just manipulating, as you said, to have the higher grades, and they are not enhancing their their skills?
Yeah, I think we've seen, that's why now I'm 40 years looking at this, and I think we see a change where early on, like still in that age of nationalism, I think students really did care about the value of being an educated person, knowing how to speak well and do things. But there has been a reorientation, that's so focused on the grade and so focused, on the kind of individual success. No, I think that has distorted things in the school too.
So there was a deterioration since the 1990s.
So if we care about things like social solidarity, if we care about things like pluralism, if we care about having a healthy civic engagement, then we say yes, there has been definitely a deterioration. It's moved into something else. As I said before, everything exists, but some things become more dominant. So in that sense, the school is become more an object of the market, and the logic of the market has come into schools. So that shifts the purpose of schooling, for sure.
But even if the logic or the market are currently dominating, it's still students don't have sufficient skills to be integrated in this market, as you mentioned.
Depending on the students. To be honest, and I'm really speaking honestly, I think I've studied like different systems. I think Egyptian students are extremely smart. So if they have openings, they can do very well. I think some people have complained, and I have seen sometimes the school suppresses talent.
How do they suppress?
Because of the rigidity of the exam system. If you think outside of the exam system, you're going to suffer in your grade. The emphasis on discipline and conformity, which can also suppress creativity in things. Although we always talk about creative thinking and all of these, in fact, the system is structured in a way that doesn't really reinforce that.
Yeah, if you want to compare between, for example, an ordinary school in Egypt and a school in the United States, for instance, what are the main features that different between the both schools?
It's very, U.S. has a very decentralized system. It's so different. There's not like one Ministry of Education. There's a Department of Education, but it's very localized. So they look very different across. But I can give you a few features of things that I like better in Egyptian schools and maybe things that I think are more positive in other schools. I really like, and people criticize me all the time, that Egyptian students still they learn how to memorize. They leave schooling with the powers of memory. I think this is a very positive thing to have in your life. I mean, barely in a typical American school, a student will graduate without even knowing a 4-line poem, and I think you have to depend on your devices for anything. So knowledge is not getting deeply
But this is widely criticized in Egypt, الحفظ والصم.
I think that's wrong, and I think that's wrong. And that's coming from these reforms from outside. I think the power of memory is extremely beneficial for many things in life. If it's only memory all the time, that's not good. But I'd say, don't lose that. Something I like about student cultures in Egypt, maybe, which is different, there still is, despite everything, more social solidarity in schools. Students help each other. Sometimes the helping looks like cheating if from the outside. Sometimes the helping is just really...
What do you mean about social solidarity? And give us an example.
So what I mean is students feel like they're in this together against the sulta, against the power. They feel a kind of sense of responsibility for each other, and they help each other. I mean, I've seen that. Maybe you have seen that too. Whereas it can be much more competitive and individualistic in a place like the U.S., And I think that's a very positive thing when students see they need help and they,
So these are the positive things, the negative things in this comparison.
In the Egypt, you mean?
Yes.
I think having one fixed curriculum for everyone with all the different circumstances is not always a positive thing. I like the idea of some fixed things, but some things coming out of the local environment. I think that's a very good thing. And that you see in a decentralized system like we have in the US, I think. So for students to see themselves more, to be more involved in that, actively, developing knowledge with people at the local level can be a good thing.
So the main problem is that the centralization of this system.
Yeah. If you call it a problem, yeah.
Yes, a kind of, or maybe a feature, one of the features of the competing ideology inside these schools between centralized states and neoliberal policies.
Yes.
That became inside the school. But from the other side, how you see the rising inequality inside the schooling system in Egypt since the 1990s?
I think the more that it becomes a model of the market, the more inequality there is. So even within, and here we look at kind of private lessons now. The range of private lessons and the different opportunities. I think, and this, honestly, you have to study more systematically. So what I'm telling you is a little bit anecdotal. So it's hard for me to know, but it appears to me that even with digital change, that actually can open opportunities for people of different means. It really can. But to follow through, I still think that the social kind of class and connections still has a lot to do with someone's success later on. So
his connection help him to have new skills, or help him to have
the job,
to have a job in the market.
To have a job.
Okay, but I'm asking about work inside the school itself. The inequality in skills inside between the international schools and the public schools.
Well,
currently.
that's a huge gap between. But I'm talking about like between schools, like a pretty good school in a city and a school in a small town or a rural area. international schools are something else.
I'm asking you about this because some of our experts, we interviewed them, like Noah Rushdie, for example, was arguing that even international schools are not working well in Egypt compared to other international schools in advanced nations.
Then she's more qualified to talk about that because I haven't recently been looking at those. But I know that when I lived here and I had kids in international schools, and they were very high standard. And I see what they're doing, the graduates, they are in top positions in the country and in other places. Because
this was not the case before 1990s. There was more equality between students.
Before the 1990s?
Yes.
I mean, before the 1990s, there was not all this privatization of schooling. So it was a totally different environment. And there was fewer schools, but at much higher, I think, quality.
So even the quality also was deteriorating after 1990s.
I think when it became very, mass, and without the resources to support it, this was a problem. It could grow very big, but then the resources went. Then there became a crisis of quality and facilities and training and retraining and all of these things.
Now you mentioned the efforts to digitalize education in Egypt, what you called in your book Utopia Technologia. And this takes us to the current efforts and to reform education. How you see the current plan to use technology as a way to decrease the gaps between public and private schooling and even inside Egypt between public school in the center and public school in other governorate out of Cairo.
Yeah, no, it's the important question of the day. So the first thing I want to say is whatever I say, it's very tentative because this is new. And we really need researchers to seriously look at what is happening with education and learning and opportunity with this. But I just want to do a definition because it's not that clear to everyone. So digitization is to change resources to a digital form. So you get knowledge and you put it in a digital form. What is happening here and around the world is digitalization. So that is the strategic use of digital technologies to fundamentally change institutional models or business models, their processes and the experiences of people who are in them. So what we're happening in Egypt and many places is digitalization of education. This is radical. This is a massive change. Imagine fundamentally changes the institutions, the processes, and the experiences. Policy is not really dealing with this. It's supposed to create new value, and revenue streams, and there are ways that revenue streams are being created with digital platforms and things.
Yes.
It transforms how organizations operate, make decisions, and deliver services. So we talk about digitalization as if, okay, students can go and get their textbooks on the Egyptian Knowledge Bank, for instance, but it's much more radical and profound than that, and we're at the early stages.
So give us an example about the good thing, the digitization.
So the good thing from my point of view is things like, I was really liked the project of the Egyptian Knowledge Bank, where any student could go and access, if they have initiative, could go and access materials that used to be behind paywalls, could really develop an interest in things and get state-of-the-art materials for that. And in fact, during the time of the Education 2.0 reforms, it was hard to get good statistics about who was using the Egyptian Knowledge Bank, but we know that students, university students and high school students in Upper Egypt in small areas were highly utilizing this, which means it was an opening. And I think that's really interesting. But knowledge without teachers is not the solution either, so you need both. But it's not enough to just have the knowledge. You need the education. So can I?
Yes.
I actually prepared something about that because it's very important. So I've been thinking a lot these days because with AI, we're seeing a massive radical paradigm shift happening in education. No one is prepared for it. And Egypt has its own AI initiatives here. There's Fahim that's going on in K to 12. University, people are using AI. We don't know what we're walking into or running into. So these are the questions I think we need to ask in this environment where honestly, I'm concerned. And I'm going to go back to somebody who published a book in 1992, which I just reread. I think he asked the best questions. Maybe you know Neil Postman. He worked in a college of education and was a media and television theorist. He wrote Technopoly in 1992. But people are talking about him again today because he asked the right questions, and we're not asking the right questions. So can I tell you some of his questions?
Sure.
So the first question in education, when we introduce something, say, what is the problem to which this technology is the solution? Right? And sometimes that's an easy question to answer, but sometimes we overdo it. So sometimes we have a hard time distributing written work, or people in the rural areas don't have access. So it's digitizing a text can be solving a problem.
Okay.
Second question, whose problem is it? All right, we always have to think about that. Very important, which people and what institutions might be most seriously harmed by a technological solution.
In case of Egypt, who are the most affected?
Well, it depends which technological solution do we want to talk about. How are teachers harmed when the technological solution is to have a smartboard in the classroom with videos of a model teacher giving a lesson? Some people think that's a solution to maybe teacher absenteeism or a bad teacher. But the teachers are actually being harmed when things are fixed and digitalized and there's a lesson being projected on the screen in the classroom. I think students are being harmed too because you need
interaction. Human interaction.
Definitely. You need a teacher to be from that local environment who knows the dialect of the children, who knows culture, who understands how to bring them in. So for instance, very important, what new problems might be created because we have solved one problem. So you solve a problem, you bring in more. And that's something as we're racing into the digitalization.
And what were the new problems in Egypt from your observation?
So the first new problem is inequality. We see some, just think about data. So in a school, there was some level, if a child could get to the school, there was a possibility of an equal experience to some extent. You've got the same books. You might have a very dedicated teacher, but now that we're depending on data, which costs money, and so much is digitalized, maybe people who don't have good resources, don't have good connections, they're going to already be at a disadvantage.
So you mean that the private schools in Egypt are presenting a more advanced digitalized education?
No, I'm talking about public schools. So public schools have really been pushing on this digital transformation by wiring schools, getting smart boards, having connection to the knowledge bank and these things. Now you can go to the school and schools are supposed to be wired and you can get things there, but you have the differences of infrastructure, for instance. The other kind of disadvantages, again, I'm going to go back to education. Transforming, a digital transformation does not mean higher education. It means higher access to knowledge, to information, but information doesn't make somebody an educated person. So that's what I'm concerned about too. Like flooding the zone with information, which we have plenty of.
You mean the importance of the role of teaching?
Teaching and remembering, why do we need education? To ask the questions, to understand society, to put to bring caution, to bring value.
But from our discussion, I didn't realize really يعني your perspective about what Egypt need from education. يعني from your perspective, يعني do we need to be more integrated in the global economy to have the students with higher skills to the market, or to be good person and a good citizen?
So I'll tell you
like the previous system. Yeah.
No, it's a good question. What I tell you has nothing. It's not just for Egypt. I'm thinking. I work in global studies and education. I think about these questions for what is education in our world. Jobs, of course, preparing people for jobs is important. But for me, who's more in the humanities, it's more important to prepare humans for how to think about the world and solve big human questions in the world. So I'm much more inclined to having deep thinkers, having creative thinkers, which I think will serve everybody in the job market. So I'm not for just doing technical learning and skills, which are, of course, skills are good, but to learn how to ask the question. This is like something going back, to Socrates and thinking about.
From your observation, how we can enhance this kind of creativity inside our schools?
I mean, this has to do with you need a little space, a little open space outside of preparing for exams. I think that's very important, number one. And I think teachers are ready for this. I think teachers are prepared and ready, but they have to have also to be able to breathe in their classrooms and bring in these kinds of issues. And probably it happens. It might happen more in informal spaces, informal learning spaces, and the formal ones, which are very structured.
Yes, okay. My final question will be about the future of education in Egypt from your view. Do you think that we are on the right way, or we need a dramatic shift in our system?
That's a very hard question you're asking me for the last question. The future, so I will say again, the future of education in Egypt is going to be a question we ask about the future of education more generally. I'm talking to you in 2026, where we see this radical change with AI coming into our school systems. I mean, it was not 1 month before ChatGPT came on the market, and my university was having a crisis with ChatGPT generated essays and papers. It was 1 month. So we know that is distorting the whole idea or understanding of education. So what is the future of education? It has to be a future where we maintain, and this is not only Egypt again, where we really ask the hard questions as why are we so readily integrating all these technologies? I know you can't stop technology when it starts, but how do we bring up the real values and have a deliberation in society about what is it that we value as Egyptians, as citizens of a place, as global citizens who see a lot of risk around us? How can education help us to bring about a bit of more just and secure world? So I think education needs to be about those big questions, not just about skills to get jobs. People will get their skills, and people often do that anyway in centers and other areas. But we need to think as a human collective, how do we manage the risks in our life, hang on and hold on to the values that we care about, and try to find, powerful ways to intervene in this very risky world that we're in.
I think to sum up your view, and you correct me if I understand well, we need a new ideology inside our schools, not the new liberal ideology or the old national ideology.
Actually, that's a perfect sum of what I'm saying. And it has to be grounded in some really good moral and human foundations.
نحتاج لمدارس يهيمن عليها التصور الخاص بإعلاء قيمة الإنسان المصري ونبعة كمان من الإنسان المصري، مش بس حتى من داخل القاهرة لكن من كافة المحافظات.
أنا معك 100%.
شكرا جدا دكتورة ليندا، استمتعنا جدا بالحوار مع حضرتك، الحقيقة كان بيحمل أبعاد مختلفة شديدة الثراء، وشكرا لحضراتكم على المتابعة، ونتمنى أن نلتقي في حوار جديد مع المنصة. شكرا لكم.
شكرا شكرا.